Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is honestly one of the most bizarre and misunderstood health paradoxes out there right now. We're looking at India's modern health landscape. And here's the crazy thing. As a population, we're actually gaining weight. But at the exact same time, we're rapidly losing our physical strength. We're getting heavier, yeah, but progressively weaker. So how exactly does that work? How can someone be overweight, maybe carrying a bit of a belly, yet remain incredibly weak on the inside? It's kind of the central medical mystery of our time. You might logically think, hey, our traditional home-cooked Indian diet is perfectly balanced, right? We eat fresh veggies, dal, roti, rice, and we always love to blame Western junk food for all our health issues. But, well, the reality of what's actually happening inside our bodies tells a completely different and, frankly, pretty shocking story. Check this out. In a massive 2020 study across 8 major Indian cities, researchers found that a staggering 71% of working-age Indians between 30 and 55 have dangerously poor muscle health. Just let that sink in for a second. 71%. We aren't talking about 70-year-old seniors here. We're literally talking about the demographic engine of the country, the people out there actively working, raising kids, running households. 7 out of 10 of them are walking around with dangerously weak muscles.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the silent muscle crisis.
To understand this, we've got to look at the biological reality of how we age. So, the human body naturally peaks in muscle mass somewhere around age 25 to 30. But after that peak, if we aren't actively doing something to preserve it, we naturally lose about 3 to 8% of our muscle mass every single decade. And once you cross 60, that decline speeds up even more. Now, this is a natural global phenomenon. But here in India, the consequences are proving to be way more severe, simply because we're totally misunderstanding what our muscles are actually for.
Section 2, the sugar tank effect.
There's this massive misconception that muscles are just, for looking good, or that they only matter if you're a bodybuilder hitting the gym. But in reality, your skeletal muscle is the largest metabolic organ in your entire body. Beyond just helping you move around, its primary job is literally to act as your body's sugar tank. Think about it. When you eat, food is broken down into glucose, which goes into your bloodstream. Your body uses insulin to push that sugar into your muscles. And get this, research shows your muscles absorb roughly 80% of it. Now imagine your sugar tank starts shrinking because you're losing muscle. You're eating the same food, producing the same amount of sugar, but the storage capacity is just gone. So that excess sugar is left just wandering around in your blood, forcing your pancreas to work overtime, which eventually leads to insulin resistance. This right here is exactly why so many thin-looking Indians are suddenly developing type 2 diabetes. And when this muscle loss gets severe, it actually turns into a recognized medical condition called sarcopenia. Essentially, it's the pathological loss of both muscle mass and muscle strength. And here's the truly terrifying part. It doesn't just suddenly appear when you blow out the candles on your 65th birthday. No, it starts silently, like completely unnoticed between the ages of 35 and 40. In India, various studies show this quietly affects 14 to 18% of the elderly population right now, with women being significantly more affected than men. Section 3, the thin fat paradox. To really wrap our heads around this crisis, we have to talk genetics. Science has actually known for about 20 years now that Indian bodies process and store weight a bit differently than the rest of the world. Just look at this famous 2004 observation published in The Lancet. It's known as the YY paradox. Researchers compared 2 doctors, one Caucasian, one Indian. On paper, they both had the exact same perfectly healthy BMI of 22.3. But when they actually measured their internal body composition, the Caucasian doctor had 9.1% body fat, while the Indian doctor had an astonishing 21.2% body fat. Even though they looked identically thin on the outside, the Indian doctor was carrying more than double the dangerous visceral fat. That's the toxic fat that wraps around your internal organs. It just goes to show that for us, the standard BMI scale is kind of lying to us. This unique genetic predisposition leads us to a toxic, worst-case scenario that doctors call sarcopenic obesity. It's exactly what it sounds like. You're gaining fat while simultaneously losing muscle. So you get all the metabolic damage and diseases that come with obesity, heavily compounded by the physical weakness and frailty of severe muscle loss. It is literally the absolute worst of both worlds. Section 4, the protein illusion. Now, what's really interesting about this data is it forces us to look away from genetics for a second and look directly down at our dinner plates. We've got some major cultural myths to unpack here. We love to pride ourselves on eating a balanced diet, but the data is glaringly obvious.
The global average for daily protein consumption is 68 grams per person, but in India, it plummets to just 47 grams. The Indian Council of Medical Research says an average adult needs roughly 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you're a 60-kilogram adult, you should be hitting a minimum of 48 to 60 grams a day. We are just severely underproteined. Surveys show 73% of Indians are deficient, and we're still almost half of the protein we do get comes from cereals like wheat and rice. Those give you a poor quality, incomplete amino acid profile compared to better sources like dairy, eggs, or paneer. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Wait a minute, I eat a bowl of dal every single day. Well, here's where the data really surprised me. A standard bowl of cooked, watery home-style dal is, well, mostly water. It actually only yields about 3 to 4 grams of actual protein. So even if you religiously eat 2 bowls a day, you're barely scraping together 8 grams of protein against a daily requirement of over 50 grams. Kind of wild, right? And hey, if you eat meat, you aren't off the hook either. A massive 65% of Indian non-vegetarian diets are also fundamentally protein deficient. You might wonder, how is that possible? Because in India, meat or eggs are usually treated as an occasional delicacy, like a weekend treat, not a daily dietary staple. On a normal Tuesday or Thursday, a non-vegetarian's plate looks identically heavy in rice and wheat as a vegetarian's plate does. Section 5. A country at risk.
A health problem of this magnitude doesn't just happen by accident. It builds up, all the way from our individual dinner plates up to national policy. If we look back to the 1960s, India was, frankly, a hungry nation. So the Green Revolution was implemented, and honestly, it brilliantly solved the immediate crisis of hunger by focusing agricultural policy entirely on producing cheap calories, specifically wheat and rice. The government threw its weight behind these crops, and it was a massive success for basic survival. But structurally, it made protein sources like pulses, milk, and eggs unreachably expensive for the average family. We learned how to fill stomachs, sure, but we completely forgot how to build bodies. And the result of that? Fast forward to 2022, and the WHO estimated that nearly 29% of all Indians were overweight or obese.
The recent National Family Health Survey 5 data paints a pretty grim picture of where all those cheap calories ended up. When researchers measured waist circumferences, they uncovered a massive abdominal obesity crisis. 40% of Indian women and 12% of Indian men are currently suffering from abdominal obesity. This clearly proves that the weight we are rapidly gaining as a nation is that dangerous visceral fat we talked about, not healthy muscle. When you combine these low-protein, high-carb diets with our aging population, you enter a really devastating vicious cycle. It starts with low muscle mass. That drops your basal metabolic rate, which basically means your body burns fewer calories while you're just sitting around doing nothing. Because you burn less, you end up storing more of your food as fat. Carrying that excess fat around causes chronic fatigue. And because you're tired all the time, your physical activity plummets, which, you guessed it, directly causes you to lose even more muscle. If we don't actively break this cycle, India's much-celebrated demographic dividend of young workers is going to age straight into a chronically ill, fatigued demographic liability. Section 6. Building a Stronger Future. So the crucial point is, the fantastic news here is that unlike many other health metrics, skeletal muscle can be actively rebuilt and strengthened at practically any age. But at a macro level, our policymakers and clinicians really need a paradigm shift. Our public distribution systems and midday meal programs have to pivot from just providing empty calories to delivering real nutrition. We're talking more dal, millets, and eggs. Agricultural support, like the minimum support price, needs to incentivize farmers to grow pulses and oilseeds just as much as wheat and rice. And medically, doctors absolutely must stop relying purely on BMI. National screening programs like Ayushman Bharat need to mandate waist measurements and body composition analysis so we can actually catch this thin fat phenotype before it turns into diabetes.
But listen, you don't have to wait around for policy changes to happen. You can take control of your own body today. First things first, stop eating all your protein in one single sitting. Spread it out. Distribute it across your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Second, when you do eat dal, make it thick, not watery, and mix it directly with a bit of rice. This is actually a brilliant old cultural hack. Doing this completes the amino acid profile, which makes the plant protein much more usable for your body. Third, and honestly most importantly, you've got to do some form of strength training 2 to 3 times a week. You don't need some fancy, expensive gym membership. Simple bodyweight squats, push-ups, or even just using resistance bands at home are incredibly effective. And ladies, this is especially vital for you because women over 40 face the steepest drops in muscle and bone density. I want to leave you with this incredibly powerful thought from the research in today's explainer. Muscle is essentially the insurance policy for your old age. The physical strength you choose to build and maintain today, that is the exact currency you're going to use to buy your independence when you're in your 70s. It's literally the difference between walking in the park with your grandchildren and being confined to a chair.
And that brings us to our final defining question. As a society and as individuals, are we going to allow our immense demographic dividend to quietly become a demographic liability? Or are we finally going to look past the weighing scale, rethink what's on our plates, and start building the muscle we need to carry us into the future? The choice is entirely in our hands, and it starts with your very next meal. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Start lifting, start eating right, and take charge of your health today.